Hi, folks. We are back at OxiMedical with another great podcast today with a special guest. I'm here with Graham, my co-pilot, and we have a special guest in today. Joe Brady is an associate professor at the University of Denver and also the Colorado School of Chinese Medicine. He has worked with us in the past on a lot of content regarding exercising with oxygen, and one of his specialties is Tai Chi, and we're going to dive into some of that today. So first and foremost, Joe, thank you for coming in today and spending some time with us, and we appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge, and we're excited to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Graham and Constantine, both of you.
Yeah, Joe, so what is Tai Chi? Can you explain that for us?
How much time do we have?
Good question. Well,
there's a lot to it. One simple way I understand it is in Chinese medicine, the Tai Chi Chuan is it's a martial art, but in recent years it's evolved into much more than that. And even in ancient times, it used to be a third of Chinese medicine. They've been great believers in physical activity and what's called Qigong, or working on your stuff. If you have breathing problems, working on your breathing and trying to improve your health that way. And so it's an important part of Chinese medicine for many centuries. And especially these days, probably about 90% of the people in the world that do Tai Chi these days do it for health purposes. And it's to quote one of the researchers at Harvard Medical School, Tai Chi is often referred to as a meditation in motion. But with all the research they've been doing, they're finding it's probably more appropriate to refer to it as a medication in motion. And that they find that so far it's been shown to be effective in the treatment of over 40 different diseases, including what we're going to talk about today, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and breathing problems, which is especially useful these days. After COVID, we're going to have a lot more problems with people having trouble breathing. And hopefully they'll get a lot of that back if they do their exercises and do their breathing stuff and follow the advice of their respiratory therapist and their pulmonologist. Hopefully a lot of those people will get their lung capacity back.
Sure. That sounds really good. What sort of medical, especially from the respiratory tract, people having issues, what are the benefits that they could expect by taking up Tai Chi?
Well, again, we could go into a broad range of medical issues that Tai Chi develops. In fact, at NIH, National Institutes of Health, we're in the middle of writing a grant for $16 million with NIH to look at Tai Chi and other alternative medicines from the point of view of salutogenesis. That's the new word in medicine, salutogenesis. And that pathogenesis is how people get sicker. Salutogenesis is just the opposite. And it turns out when you do things like physical activity, when you do things like Tai Chi and yoga, you tend to move the entire system toward healthier. And so with the Tai Chi, because it's got multiple active ingredients, for example, it's physical activity, it's breathing exercises, it's meditation, it tends to move the entire system toward healthier. And so in our case, people may get introduced to Tai Chi because they're interested in their breathing and improving that. But any respiratory therapist will tell you, if you just give people breathing exercises by themselves, it very quickly evaporates into nobody doing them. It's boring, let's face it. Yet if you have multiple things that you're doing with the exercise, it makes it more interesting for the mind. And so the Chinese find that there's much better compliance with it. And especially, again, so we're talking about the breathing exercises today. My sister's a respiratory therapist, and one of their biggest frustrations is they know all the exercises in Tai Chi and how to improve somebody's breathing. But getting them to do it long enough to really see the benefit, that's a problem. That's difficult. With the Tai Chi, because it's been around for so many centuries, they have lots of different interesting exercises that you can do. So when you get tired of one, you can do another. I know I filmed a series of videos for OxiMed on some of the healing sounds and using it, and depending upon what your emotions are doing on a given day. You can do it, obviously, for martial arts purposes. Our oldest Tai Chi student right now is a 98-year-old little Japanese woman. They call her Kung Fu Grandma. And she's only interested in the martial arts because it gives her something to talk to her grandchildren about. They're taking karate classes. They show her a couple moves, and then she shows them a couple moves, and it gives her something to work with. And so because it's filled with legends and stories and all different kinds of exercises that people can do, it's much easier to get people to do it over a long period of time. And Constantine, Graham, I know you guys are familiar with this, but with someone with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, the progress is so slow that it's very discouraging for people. And it's really hard for them to keep going long enough to actually start to see the benefit. With my own lung problems, it took me a good 2 years to get to a point with the breathing exercises where I finally feel like I'm actually making some progress. And so in that difficulty with it, people have to have stuff to keep it interesting. And you've got to have stuff that keeps you motivated to do it every day. And I find the Tai Chi is particularly suited for that.
Yeah, so it sounds like Tai Chi has physical and mental benefits that can be long-lasting, keeping you interactive in sounds like a fun activity as well.
That's generally the idea. It's kind of interesting, but when you study in China, I had one of the Chinese coaches. He was actually showing me in an English Chinese dictionary, the definition of the word dumbbell. And he wanted to know if that was a coincidence. Do we call it that for a reason? And he said, when you look in China, they get almost 100% compliance with physical activity. And I know we like to think of it as well as there's cultural differences and why Americans are not doing it, or we say Americans are lazy or whatever. And actually, it's just a different way of looking at physical activity. We look at physical activity as if it's some chore that we have to do, that if we do it enough and we discipline ourselves enough, someday we might get a benefit. The Chinese look at it as choose exercises that are fun and enjoyable, and that's where you'll do it long enough to actually get the benefit. So if you go, as some students will go on a tourist excursion in China, and one of those things they're most amazed with is you can get up 5:30 in the morning and go out in the park, and there's thousands of people in the park exercising. But you won't see a dumbbell anywhere in the place. They're playing tennis and they're doing ballroom dancing and they're practicing Tai Chi. And this lady over here is practicing a sword form, and they believe in keeping it interesting. I had one Chinese coach put it this way: if you want to understand the difference between exercise compliance in the West versus exercise compliance in China, is take a gymnasium and on one side of the gymnasium, put a bunch of dumbbells. On the other side of the gymnasium, put a bunch of swords. And then put some children into the room. Which will they play with? The swords. Now, they're not weapons grade swords. They're basically tinfoil, but it's inherently more interesting that way. And so by offering that kind of variety, by offering that kind of interesting activities to do and skills to work on, like when someone gets tired of working on their breathing, we work on balance while at the same time they're working on their breathing. We can work on their aerobic capacity while at the same time they're working on their breathing. And by being able to have that kind of variety in the activity, compliance is a lot easier. I've been doing this since 1967, and I haven't found the bottom of it yet. There's always interesting new stuff to learn. And especially with what I do these days with the research, there's more and more very interesting research being done on the multiple benefits from doing this kind of mind-body exercise.
So I'd like to point out something that pertains not just to our patients, but people with lung disease or COPD. It certainly has a huge benefit for them. But we find that a lot of our patients probably have a couple of things that are wrong with them. So, Joe, this sounds like this is good for people who have high blood pressure. This is good for people who maybe aren't physically able to be extremely active. This can be done from home, right? They don't have to go outside to do it.
Mm-hmm. And with each of the things you mentioned, one of the biggest things, especially in older populations, one of the biggest things the physicians are concerned with is falls and balance. in which case, we've got a number of online Zoom Tai Chi classes. And we get a lot of people in those classes that would normally not exercise outside. That for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. They may have multiple medical problems. Balance is a crucial one because it's regardless of what's going on with somebody, most older adults, if they can maintain their ability to get out and about, they can live with a little heart disease. Their doctor can worry about it. But if they take a fall, that puts an end to a lot of things and usually starts this big spiral down. And so with the Tai Chi, what we're finding is people can not only exercise at home, but they can begin to improve at a very basic level and start by working on their balance and working on their breathing and work on basic motor skills that would allow them to then go do more with a little bit more confidence. Especially with a lot of my older adults that maybe have some balance problems, I'll encourage them to carry a walking stick. And just that one stupid little addition to what they're doing, there's a whole cane form in Tai Chi, by the way. And Tai Chi canes or walking sticks are usually made with either a sword inside, and it's used for teaching young people respect for their elders. Or I've got one student who's got a nice little flask that's hidden in the handle so you can carry a little brandy with them. But the point is that allows them to go places and do things and be more active and get stronger that they would not have been able to do confidently without it. And with having people begin doing the Tai Chi at home, it helps to overcome a lot of issues. So talking about the breathing stuff, a lot of people, when they got to use a concentrator, I know when I first started using a concentrator after I was sick, you feel real self-conscious being out in public with the thing. And so they're afraid to go to an exercise class. They're afraid to go to something outside. It's just embarrassing. In which case they can begin to do the exercises at home with their concentrator on. And it's really a good idea I'm finding with dealing with patients with this, is to go ahead and if you've got to be on a concentrator for any length of time, get a good one. The ones they give them with Medicare, they're like these big clunky old things that make it difficult to exercise using the concentrator. So I'll tell them, go ahead and get a good one. Get one that's lightweight that you can carry around without it being an impediment, in which case you can begin doing the exercises at home. You can even use a home concentrator with a hose if you're doing it at home, and begin the process of getting your body stronger. Begin the process of getting your lungs stronger. Begin the process of being able to get a little bit of activity without having your oxygen drop like a rock. In which case, little by little by little, that allows the person to go more places and do more things. And it all begins to add upon itself. Every little bit they can do makes them that little bit stronger. And especially when it comes with the breathing one, and I'm gonna beat this one to death a little bit because people that have these kinds of difficulties need to be encouraged to continue to do it. And one of my Tai Chi teachers years ago told me that the way you build up strength, the way you improve your vital capacity is like putting a piece of paper on your desk. If you put a piece of paper on your desk, how thick is it? It's like nothing. But if every day you put another piece of paper on that desk, and the next day you put another piece of paper, and the next day you put another piece of paper, how long before you got a pile of papers 3 feet tall on your desk? That's how you make progress with any kind of physical activity, but especially when it comes to doing any of the exercises to try to make your vital capacity stronger.
Joe, you mentioned a lot of great points, and something that, Graham and I were talking about before you came was, can you explain what the difference between yoga and Tai Chi is, and explain the medical benefits that are supported by, like you mentioned earlier, the CDC and the health advocates? Can you dive into that?
Well, first, from my Tai Chi teacher's point of view, he would describe the difference between Tai Chi and yoga, because you get that question a lot, is yoga teaches you how to find your center. Tai Chi teaches you how to use it. And because of that emphasis on using it, it also makes the CDC and the Surgeon General's office a little bit happier, because it does meet the Surgeon General's recommendations for a moderate physical activity. And they found that even if they look at what we call Fu Tai Chi, Tai Chi down the senior center where people aren't really trying all that hard to do it well, still, they come in at about 2.2 METs or metabolic equivalents, was just meet the recommendations for a moderate aerobic exercise, in which case you're getting multiple benefits. Now, don't get me wrong, the yoga is wonderful exercise and the breathing exercises are fantastic, but it doesn't quite come in as a physical activity. And so having said that, if yoga is somebody's particular cup of tea, do the yoga, make a daily practice of it, but you're going to have to add a little bit of walking or a little bit of Tai Chi or a little bit something extra on top of it to make sure that you're getting all the benefits that you need for your health.
Perfect. That's a really good explanation for folks out there that may be curious like we were. And let's say that we get folks that are listening right now, and we get, folks that are like, you know what, I don't need any dumbbells. I don't need any exercise equipment. I can literally do it from a spare room from anywhere. When would you recommend the best time of day, or how would somebody practice this or start practicing Tai Chi?
In an ideal world, everybody's here is hip to the fact that we're not living in an ideal world. In an ideal world, the way the Chinese recommend it is they will practice their Tai Chi like first thing in the morning. And the reason for that is that it kind of sets your mind and body for dealing with the stresses of day-to-day life during the day. And so it said, one of my students once did a historical survey looking at warrior societies, the samurai, the Comanches here in Colorado. And what they found was they don't wait until after a stressful day to meditate. Invariably, they would meditate before the battle, before the stressful day, in order to make things go well, to put yourself in a better position to deal with the stresses of the day. I find that's particularly important with people with breathing issues, is to go ahead and start the day when the air is fresh and the air is clean. I don't know where else everybody else is listening to this around the country, but the air pollution here in Colorado has been horrible all summer. And your best shot, if you're going to do any breathing exercise, is do it first thing in the morning, before the ozone levels go up, before the smoke starts going up. Here in Colorado over the summer, usually the best air quality we have is first thing in the morning. And then as you get into later afternoon, it drops like a rock. And so ideally, in an ideal world, first thing in the morning would be a good time. The Chinese also are great believers in after a day of work, after a day of stress and dealing with whatever, is they'll stop off at the park and they'll practice their Tai Chi once more so that they don't bring the stress of work home to the family. They believe in kind of gradually changing gears. And so here in this country, we have a stressful day at work. We go home immediately and kick the dog. The Chinese would prefer if you stop off in the park and kind of collect yourself before you take that crap home to the family. So that's in an ideal world, but we don't live in an ideal world. So in reality, any time of day that somebody can get a little bit of physical activity in, any time of day they can get one of their breathing exercises done, any time of day they do it. One joke in exercise physiology, people ask, what's the best kind of exercise to do? And the answer is always the same. The one that you did is the best one to do. Because if you don't do it, it doesn't do you any good no matter what kind of physical activity it is.
So, Joe, how long would a person spend, and what would you consider somebody wanting to start? How would they start? How much time would they spend on Tai Chi? What do you call practicing Tai Chi? Just to give people a reference.
Good. So technically, anything where your mind is fully engaged in the activity is Tai Chi. And so in my Tai Chi classes, the opening sequence, the first move in the Tai Chi is a little exercise called walking on ice in the dark. And it's one of the best balance exercises that people can do. And so even if they just start with that one exercise, and again, when people get up, you got to wait for the coffee to brew anyway. So go ahead and start the coffee pot. Take a couple minutes while you're waiting for the coffee to brew and do one movement. And very quickly, that turns into two movements. Very quickly, the coffee's not done yet. Oh, I'll throw in that breathing exercise in there. And little by little, you develop a practice. This is actually from the Tai Chi classics. And you're familiar with the classics, right, Graham? Graham, you read the classics, right?
Yeah, of course I do, Joe.
All right, so you're familiar with this term? Journey of 1,000 miles begins where?
With the first step.
That's a reference specifically to that first move in the Tai Chi Chuan. In China, they say that learning Tai Chi is a journey of 1,000 miles. There's lots of fun stuff to learn. You got plenty of time to learn it, but it begins with that first step. It begins, the second movement starts the breathing exercises. And so, again, in this case, for this particular audience, I'd have them start with those two. Start with the first step and start with the first breath. In which case, very quickly, people start adding more to it and a little more and a little more as they learn more to keep it interesting. And then next thing you know, before they know it, they're doing a whole form. We're finding these days one of the easiest ways for people to get started with Tai Chi is when the pandemic hit, we were doing all outside classes with our regular students. And my wife started bugging me when the pandemic hit and everything shut down is we got to do something. And so we started doing Zoom classes. And I was shocked. I mean, we got the one class with DU. I got 115 students in the class. And so we're finding that a lot of people that are in the kind of situation you're talking about, maybe they have multiple medical problems, whatever, they're not real good at getting out of the house. Maybe they don't look good in a leotard going to a gym, in which case they're getting a lot of mileage out of learning some stuff online that way. And I think we'll put up a link at the end here where people can have access to some free Zoom classes if they wanted to get started with it. I know that they can access the videos that we made for OxiMed very easily, and we can put those links up as well.
Sure, yeah. I'm intrigued. And like you said, taking the first step, where would they go to learn more, Joe?
Again, the easiest thing is either the videos that we already made with OxiMed or to start with the Zoom classes that we have. Because it's going around all over the country, I don't really know any particular recommendation for a particular teacher. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. You've got some people, like Tai Chi is like anything else. You've got some people, for example, that want to learn the martial arts. I had one of my older adults, she went to a Tai Chi class for Chen style. And the first thing they taught her was how to beat somebody up. Well, she's 76 years old. That was not her interest. And so it'd be a good idea to look up a teacher in your area that actually is experienced with working with health issues. And again, normally I'd be able to recommend, like you go to your rec center or whatever, and usually most places they're pretty good about screening the people that they hire, that they're qualified for what they're doing. These days, I don't even know where rec centers are open. I know here in Denver it's kind of hit and miss. Some of the outlying suburbs have some open, but some don't. And so easiest thing to do. The other thing was we can put up my website on there, taichidenver.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if somebody's got. If I do know somebody in the area, I'd happily recommend them, but I'd need a little bit more information.
Joe, just so our listeners can understand that you are a man of many talents, but what brought you to OxiMedical, or how did we meet? How can people relate to some of the things they're dealing with and what happened to you along your journey a couple years ago?
The reason I met Constantine was I couldn't frickin' breathe. I had 2019
Pre-COVID.
Thanksgiving, pre-COVID. Although there's some question about what I was sick with.
I agree.
I ended up getting both a viral pneumonia and a bacterial pneumonia and influenza and severe asthma reaction. That was my official diagnosis. In other words, they really didn't know what the hell was wrong with me. They never did identify the virus that I got sick with. But I ended up spending about 3 days in intensive care. I've never been so sick in my life. I didn't know you could be so sick that your hair hurt. I didn't know hair could hurt. And then when I was done with all that, they sent me home with oxygen and quite frankly told me that I'd probably be on oxygen the rest of my life. And I'm stubborn. I'm half Irish and half Sicilian, so I wasn't going to stand for that. I wanted to get back to Tai Chi as quickly as I could. So one of the first things I did was look up portable oxygen concentrators. They gave me this big lunky old thing that I couldn't lug around, couldn't really do anything with without looking like, I don't know, I was carrying an intensive care unit around with me everywhere. And so I started looking around online, found a good deal with OxiMed and one of their concentrators, and I got one. And then what it was is there was something screwed up with it. It wasn't working. And I came back and I got in touch with Constantine here. And nicely enough, he just replaced, I think it was the battery. He just gave me a new battery and didn't charge me nothing. I thought that was great. We got talking and told him what I did. And I taught Tai Chi and worked at the university and whatever. And one thing led to another. And Constantine asked if I would mind making some videos, showing somebody doing Tai Chi and exercise and wearing an oxygen concentrator. And we did that, and I managed, and I ended up, so I haven't really talked in person with Constantine since the pandemic broke down, but I ended up using the portable concentrator probably for about 6 months when I'd go out doing anything difficult, and they had me on oxygen at night, and for that. And then after about 6 months with it and checking my oxygen constantly, if you look at any of the videos that we put online, I show you how to keep your pulse ox meter handy so that you can check your oxygen, in which case you can do that while you're doing the Tai Chi. I could put the pulse ox meter on my finger and just go through my form. And at first it was kind of interesting because I could go through most of the form, my oxygen was fine. I get to one particular sequence called the grasp sparrow's tail, and my oxygen would plummet. And couldn't figure out why on those certain movements was the oxygen dropping. It wasn't making any sense. They weren't any more strenuous than the other movements. And then finally realized that I've been doing Tai Chi so long that there's a martial art technique called push hands, where you take and pop the guy 30 feet across the park. And I've gotten good enough over the years to where that grass sparrow's tail sequence were the only movements that I would have to use in order to pop somebody across the park. And then I realized that when I got to those movements, I was changing my breathing. As if I were going to pop somebody across the park, you got to tighten your abdomen a little bit. And that's why I was dropping. And so it was interesting being able to check the oxygen while I was exercising because it uncovered a particular movement that the way I was doing it was great for martial arts, but terrible for my breathing. And at this point, I managed to correct that. And now I don't worry so much about popping people across the park.
And for the record, how many people have you popped across the park, Joe?
Oh, quite a few back in the day. I've been doing this since 1967. And through 1980s, 70s, and 80s was more of my rough and tumble time period. And again, the Tai Chi is quite versatile. It makes a very good martial art and very interesting. So in my younger years, that was more the attraction. When I came here to Denver, I started working for the University of Denver doing aging and health research on these things. And that's when my interest gravitated more and more toward the health aspects of it rather than the martial arts aspect. But if you want, Constantine, after this session, I'll take you out in the alley and do a demonstration.
I think Graham, Graham would be a good test subject. We'll see how far, we'll measure it out, how far you fly back. Joe, this has probably been one of the most exciting podcasts that we've done to date. So I appreciate you chiming in and letting folks know a little bit about yourself and just a little bit on the science of what Tai Chi is. And quite frankly, I think one of the things that we always recommend our folks when they call in and they want freedom and they want to enhance their quality of life, most folks are stuck with these big, heavy, clunky tanks. And we always, tell folks, well, this will increase your quality of life. And we think that any exercise, and particularly we wanted to talk with you for quite a while, because this has got to be one of the most simplistic things that anybody from the age of 18 to their late 90s can pick up, and they don't need to start somewhere, that they have never, tried this before. They can pretty much go to your Zoom class if they don't find anything local, and it's something that they can just immediately start watching. Yep.
Yes.
Perfect.
They can follow along easily. And just to kind of continue with that, I would encourage anybody, if you're stuck with one of those big old clunky ones, is go ahead and get a good one. It makes a big difference in quality of life. And I know that sounds like an ad, and it is kind of, but at the same time, it's true. I've had I practice traditional Chinese medicine, and over the last couple of years, I have quite a few patients that with COVID and everything have had some difficulties, and it makes a big difference. When they can just sling something over their shoulder and go places, they go more places, in which case they get more exercise, and things start to improve much quicker than sitting on the couch with a hose all day.
Yeah, and I think you ended up buying the G5 when you came in to see us. That G5
Yes.
concentrator was probably the one that fits you the best. And like Joe mentioned, at the end of the podcast and throughout the podcast, you'll see some links and some places where you folks can visit. And if anybody has any questions, Joe's a pretty accessible guy, and he would love to help anyone who reaches out. And then, Joe, I have not done your Tai Chi class yet, but I will sign up for the Zoom class.
You better, otherwise I'm going to take you out in the alley.
Sounds good. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We will be having some more podcasts with Joe, included as part of this growing topic of exercising and wellness and aging. I think is a very important topic that we'd like to touch up on, especially for folks who are at home and feel like they're a prisoner in their own home. So I thank you guys for tuning in today.
And thank you also for listening.
Thanks for having me, fellows.